welcome. I see we have a few people here. This is rather funly. We'll make words up right off the start because that shows our expertise in certain areas, AI and AI. Joel approached me a month or two ago, I guess, maybe when he was planning this week, and asked if I'd be interested in talking about this artificial intelligence and academic integrity. We chatted about it at the academic integrity community of practice sessions and shared a couple articles back and forth. Yeah, first slide here. A couple of my favorite Hollywood AIs. If anyone wants to take a stab at them, do we know all three up there in the chat? Or mics on? This one's pretty popular, 90s one. Got the agents from the Matrix movie. They were an AI. Terminator, pretty famous one. And how about this fellow over here? Anybody watch Altered Carbon on Netflix? All right, that's Poe. He's an AI hotel. David's turned his camera on. He must have watched Altered Carbon.
No, I feel guilty for not being into pop culture and probably more into academic integrity, but I'll definitely watch it.
If you're into sci-fi kind of stuff, Altered Carbon is pretty slick. So that's Poe, and he's an AI hotel in the future, which is basically, well, I don't want to give too much away, but in that show, we're all kind of been reduced to ones and zeros, and we're living in an AI similar to sort of the Matrix thing, but AI hotels can do anything you want, be your guardian, your bodyguard, or furnish you with any type of room service you need in this miraculous future. But so anyways, that's Poe, and he's one of my favorite AIs from pop culture. So yeah, so how did I end up here? This is the sort of ominous braggy slide, and I don't know how braggy it is, but I've been doing ed tech support with the Faculty of Education at Lakehead University for over 20 years. I think I get a pin or something this year. Terribly exciting times. I did work for TSC 2 years before that. It was actually known as CTRC back then. It was so long ago. I have managed to graduate from Lakehead University 3 times, and I am working on doing that a 4th time. I'm working on a PhD. My research interest is actually on ed tech implementation in the K-12 sector, because in my career, in the Faculty of Education, we keep buying technology because school boards have technology. So I'm very curious about how school boards decide to get technology. So yeah, my full-time day job is advising and selecting technology. So I certainly have an interest in AI, how it interacts with technology here in higher education and also in the K-12 sphere, because working in this faculty, of course, we are preparing new teachers for certification in Ontario with their credentials, which we are accredited to grant here in our undergraduate programs. So yeah, a little bit more about me. I'm a father in a very big, busy house, big blended family, 5 kids between 8 and 22. My partner's a teacher, so strong ties to education. And full disclaimer here, this session is delivered a lot more from my interest than my expertise. You know, I talked a little bit about my research there off the start, but I hope that you come away with some stuff to think about and something, you know, sort of interesting to think about how AI may or may not be a part of higher education from a couple different perspectives. We'll see how this goes. All right, so what do we want to do here today? I hope we kind of have an idea of what AI, artificial intelligence, is by the time we get to the end of the session. And I kind of want to look at this from 2 perspectives, the sort of student side of things, where there's all these crazy AI tools out there that can help students, and at what points do they start to infringe upon academic integrity, and where are the lines on that? So that maybe will be some discussion or some to think about. But also there's a whole other side of AI for instructors. This is a faculty session, of course, as far as plagiarism detection or adaptive case studies and stuff. I was at a session that was delivered by a fellow named Dr. Ron Babin at Toronto Metropolitan University, formerly known as Ryerson. And he's using AI in the Faculty of Business there to have his students work through case studies that are actually adaptive and responsive. So fairly interesting stuff happening there. I didn't know how big attendance was going to be, in planning online pedagogy with not being sure of your attendance is a little bit of a challenge. There's a couple questions in the slides. I was going to try to use the reactions if we want. They are down by the raise hand and the yes or no to answer those questions. But given the size of our audience, I'm totally okay with the chat or mics or whatever, because I think we have time for that. But if you're not sure where the reactions are, the little screenshot there. So if we get to a question at the bottom of the slide and you're more comfortable participating that way, that's totally fine. Or whatever works for you. Uh, Anyone come here with any other questions about AI and AI that I don't sort of have on the little rundown here? I'm happy to think about that right now, or you think about that, and if we get to the end, we can do questions then. So I guess very loosely and generally first, if we're going to talk about artificial intelligence, I'd like to sort of give a definition of how I see it and what my understanding is and what we're going to sort of base today's talk on. So artificial intelligence is computational or computers that are making decisions and perhaps interacting with people. But what's different than traditional computers is that the outputs are not necessarily bound as they would have been with a traditional program where there's one right answer or one wrong answer or a certain number of paths based on a certain number of variables. So the computer can accept various types of inputs and it will render only a certain set of outputs based on those variables and those inputs. So that's traditionally the way we've thought about computers working for a long time. You know, you will say do X and it will do X, or you will say do X if Y, and if the condition Y is present, then X will happen. When we get into the scope of artificial intelligence, this is where the computers are starting to do more things that we would liken to be consciousness or rational thought. So all of the possible outcomes are not necessarily known to the computer, but the computer has some algorithms or some type of mechanism in its programming to help it make a decision based on the inputs it gets. But the inputs aren't necessarily going to result in the same output all the time with artificial intelligence. And the output may also be based sometimes on the machine's previous experience. So the machine now has the ability to potentially do what we would consider learning, and that is learning on its own, learning beyond uploading new data sets to it. So in the AI community, they talk about two sort of things. One being strong AI, which is where you're actually approaching that consciousness, and that's sort of the sci-fi realm of the robots have killed us all and taken over the world because they realize we're the ones destroying the planet. Strong AI not super accessible or affordable for most people right now. And what's referred to in the AI community is GoFi, which is good old fashioned artificial intelligence. So that's a less complex system and is certainly most of the things we talk about today are going to be over in that GoFi category. So again, for our purposes today, what we're going to talk about as far as artificial intelligence is a sort of computer program that's able to make decisions that are more human-like and operate outside the bounds of basic inputs and outputs. So with that, is anyone here using anything they think might be AI in their teaching? I think David, Heidi, go for it. Got anything? No, just saying hello.
Well, I don't know whether it is, but you had on the earlier slide that those adaptive things that textbook people offer, that those are AI. I never thought about it, and I have been using those. Stopped for cost reasons. Students complained it was too expensive, kind of thing. But I never thought that this was actually AI, but makes sense that it is.
Yeah,
So
I think it is in its simplest form. Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I think I would say it's AI because I think as those systems are gathering more input, they're predicting using whether it's stats or data analysis, they're still predicting how to output without a programmer going in there necessarily. I mean, there's an algorithm that's telling you how to do that, but the programmer's not going in there and saying, this is the threshold or this is the way. So things AIs are creeping in, especially good old fashioned AI. And I struggle, and I think without really knowing the code of a system, it's hard to know unless the publisher or provider is saying it's an AI, if it's an AI, because certainly we can have huge complex data sets and variables now in computers and provide outputs, but sort of things that are making decisions or adapting. Adaptive tutors definitely on the list of things for AI. So, all right. I like to throw this up whenever I talk about any type of technology in education or in society, really not necessarily confined to education. So we've got a technology adoption life cycle here, or an innovation adoption curve. So this is sort of the groups of people and the speed at which any type of technology is adopted. So, if you think about the iPhone or the smartphone or the BlackBerry or, the personal computer or the laptop or tablet, anything like that, smart thermostats, for example, any type of new technology that's sort of showing up in the household, you usually have the innovators early at the beginning, early in the market. And those are the folks that know this is not going to work and it's going to be a struggle and it's going to break. And then they sort of get the early adopters on board. And once all the bugs are kind of work out and things work more seamlessly, you get your early and late majority, of course, and then the laggards at the end. What's interesting to me, and you don't see necessarily in this curve, is that I think this curve is a direct correlation to accessibility and affordability with technology, because of course, folks who are doing research or have a big research or a funded budget to play with some of these toys might not necessarily be an innovator, but they may want to be there. So AIs are starting to be more commonplace. We're starting to see them. We've got personal assistants, whether you've got a Google Home Mini or Siri on your smartphone or these type of things. These type of computers or computer programs that you can speak to in normal language and get responses from, they're doing more complex processing. So in education, I think that, we're certainly still in, especially higher education and AIs, I think we've got innovators and maybe some early adopters playing with some of these simple things. But I do like to put this up here just for everyone's consideration. And also know that I reference an article later on the talk, and AI in education has actually been written about in peer-reviewed publications for over 30 years. So it's not as new as we think, but that accessibility and affordability piece, as microchips and processors and RAM have gotten cheaper, because of course these complex computations in AIs need powerful computers. It's become more accessible to sort of the everyday folks in higher education. Any questions about the curve or no? I'm in the faculty of education. I got to stop talking every once in a while and see if there's questions, because we're supposed to be modeling good pedagogy. So a word of caution with AIs. I know Heidi mentioned she was using one and hadn't really even thought about it, but at a certain point on this curve, this sort of inevitably happens, and this is from my own experience, and we've all seen this too. There's potential for profit, and everybody sort of wants to get in, right? Like Google's bought a few AI startups for millions of dollars, and so there's sort of like this huge potential for profit in the private sector where folks want to make money, and it seems like these are the times when some of these tools are sort of running fast and loose and there's not a lot of regulations and maybe there's not much of a moral compass. You see tools like, I know Joel has brought up before, like Chegg, for example, which is a website out there that is sort of like a test bank archive that students can subscribe to. And Chegg bills themselves as this wonderful tutorial service and doesn't ever want to admit that people are using this like for outright cheating. So, how these things get regulated and how they happen, the further to the left they are on the innovation curve, the sort of less regulation and understanding we have as an institution, as a faculty, as a department about how these tools are being used. So just something to sort of ponder there if you're contemplating heading down this AI road with your instructor, whether it's adaptive tutorials, or if you're starting to think like, what are my students doing with these tools that are out here, and are they in fact, in breach of academic integrity regulations or code of student conduct and things like that, and how clearly we spell things out in our syllabi and so on too can also help with this, right? If you are very clear in your instructions and expectations in your course, then you don't risk getting into this sort of gray area where the student says, well, I didn't know that I couldn't use a paraphrasing tool online to rewrite my essay, or an essay generator or something like that, right? So as instructors, something to think about as you're laying out assignments and assigning work for students. As these tools become more prevalent and available, we need to be more explicit about what the expectations are in our courses. AI comes with a lot of challenges. They have really terrible inherent biases. Does anyone want to take a stab on why they think AI might have biases built into them? It's a terrible, terrible answer, unfortunately. Yeah, go ahead, David.
I was just going to guess maybe that there's biases built into the algorithms behind them. So sort of course, you're going to see that on the output.
Yeah, 100%. So I mean, these algorithms are initially built off of data sets, and it's a terrible thing to say, but unfortunately, we still live in a society that where racism and misogyny and things like this are prevalent. So data sets that we have, even if we don't know, as we're building these AIs, are having these sort of bias programmed into them. There's a famous example from Amazon, and if you're familiar with it, I apologize for recanting it. If not, Google it. But Amazon was building an AI to help them sort all the applicants they got for people that wanted to work at Amazon. So it was a ranking system, and it would scan resumes and do whatever else it wanted to do about people and rank people. And they had to scrap it because it was docking points off of female applicants. The AI was actually ranking all the females lower. And when the software engineers and the folks in charge at Amazon dug down and tried to figure this out, it was because the AI had been programmed with historical hiring data. And the misogyny and sexism that has existed in corporate America and North America for years is in that data set and evident in that data set. Amazon over the years had hired more males than females. So the AI decided that males were more valuable than females and was docking points on the females. And so terribly scary things, because we think we're developing rational thought with computers, but how we code the morals and ethics of these things is a whole other challenge. Sort of same other problems have arisen with some of the AIs that do facial recognition. They're out there for proctoring software. They're out there in the policing world for security. They struggle to distinctly identify features on people of color in some cases. So a lot of these technologies are struggling, and they're also in many cases amplifying some of the challenges that we face in our society. So it's definitely things to think about if you're considering implementing an AI for your teaching. Try to take that big picture look and decide, is this an equitable application of a piece of software, and who is it going to hurt, potentially unbeknownst to you. I mean, like I said, the Amazon one is a wonderful example. I certainly don't think that Jeff Bezos set out to be sexist when he was trying to code an AI to get through his applicants faster, but they came very close to getting some egg on their face had they gone forward with it. Yeah, there's all kinds of privacy concerns with some of these AIs too, especially the proctoring ones that are capturing things. There was a time, I don't know if it's still the case, but the international airports in China, folks weren't allowed to wear a baseball cap because it obstructed their face, and the AIs they had running for facial recognition and all the airport terminals malfunctioned. So you weren't allowed to have your face obstructed at all because the security is so high in some of those airports, they didn't want you want things covered up. So as we sort through these and try to deal with these, there's an example that you can go play with, or maybe we can even go play with if you want today, from MIT, and it's called the Moral Machine. Anyone seen this website or played with it? No. Okay, let's go play with it for a minute, because I think we have a little bit of time. Okay, so the folks at MIT are trying to help self-driving cars figure out what to do. And we are happy to participate in English, and we'll start judging scenarios. So basically they have all these scenarios on here, and you can work through them, and you have to pick who you want to kill. Unfortunately, this is the sort of classic trolley dilemma, if you're familiar with it, where do you pull the lever and send the trolley off to run over a criminal, or do you not intervene and let the trolley run over a mother and a child, right, if the runaway trolley's headed towards you? So they're quite interesting, and they'll just Google it if you want to play with it. But the MIT Moral Machine, do we have a vote? Anyone want to take a crack at this one? What do we want to do? So do we want to kill a homeless person and a man, or a man and a male executive? But if we kill the man and the male executive, we're intervening. So there's no right or wrong. Well, our moral compasses have right or wrong answers. Don't say there's no right or wrong answers, but. So do we think the car should veer to spare the homeless man, or should there be no action? Any thoughts? It doesn't matter. We can pick one if no one wants to dive in. What do you want to do, David?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the key here is about when they're crossing, right? The one.
Yeah, there's green light, red light. Good pickup on that for sure.
So I don't know. I think if you're crossing on a red signal.
Yeah. those are the folks that have chosen to put themselves in jeopardy, right? Okay, so anyways, there's a number of them here, but the purpose of this is AI and self-driving cars. This is why the folks at MIT have this website and why they developed it. It's been around for a long time, and I think it's sort of become a pop culture novelty thing. But basically, you know, the number one rule of robotics is that the robot's not supposed to harm the creator, right? So there's some other interesting dilemmas in these sort of AIs and self-driving cars and all these algorithms, whereas like, you know, if the car is going to either drive off a cliff and kill the owner of the car or hit a school bus and potentially hurt a bunch of kids, well, can it violate that rule of robotics? So I don't want to spend too much time on the moral machine because it's, you know, I guess in some ways there's a sort of ethical connection with AIs and with everything to do with academic integrity and what you think is right or wrong. And we all sort of have different directions. If you do work through 13 scenarios when you have time on themoralmachine.net, they do ask you for some feedback at the end, and it also gives you a ranking. It'll tell you which lives you value more. When you get through it later on, there are some professionals like doctors and lawyers that you have to choose between. And it will also, you know, tell you if you value youth over or age or something. So, you know, I took a philosophy of death course in an undergraduate course, and we had wonderful long discussions about the value of a life, the dollar value of a life, and you know where at what age or what education level does that peak, or all lives worth the same. So we don't want to head too far down that road, but these are decisions that AIs have to make and may have to make, and these are challenges for computer scientists and software engineers and philosophers and ethicists and folks that, you know, study morals as well. So not to go too far off there, but I wanted to show you folks that because I thought it was sort of interesting and related to today's talks. So with that, does anyone here think that they maybe have students using AIs to do some of their coursework? Heidi or David or Yana, anyone think they've come across that? And listen, I'm from education, so I have to play with all my toys. So while you ponder that, all right, I have to do it. It goes over better with my undergrads when there's like 200 of them and I throw a Zoom poll up there, but I wasn't sure what to plan for. So anyone with us today have, yeah, hi.
Yeah, I don't suspect. I'd rather say I worry. The first time I learned about AI and what you actually could do, you know, take a bunch of sources and have the computer write up a whole kind of thing. So I was just marking e-portfolios over the reading week, and a few times when it was well written, I was wondering, I wonder. But I think it's unfair to think that way, right? And if you said you got to get to it, unless I have a way to actually find out, it's not fair to say the student likely did. But it's a worry I have.
Yeah, so there's an ethical question there, right? Like, should these software providers be tagging or watermarking or disclosing this somehow, right? If you're, you know, I mean, everything out there is ones and zeros in the computer land, and maybe the student finds a way to remove it. But like, you know, do these corporations have sort of some ethical obligation to mark this in a way to make our lives as instructors easier? Or should there be, you know, do we need software like Turnitin available at the university for plagiarism check, which, you know, could potentially cross-reference databases of these sort of paraphrasing or essay writing tools? And I've got a couple examples of them on the next few slides. So if folks aren't familiar with them, then you'll at least see the names of them and you can maybe go play with them to see what they're capable of. But again, like back to the academic integrity thing, you know, you have to use your sort of intuition with these things. And if, you know, you have a student that's written 3 C papers and they hand in an A paper, sometimes things are a little off. And yeah, go ahead, Joel.
Yeah, I was just going to say we have had, you know, in my role, kind of seeing all the cases of academic integrity breaches come through our office here. When it comes to AI usage, we have like recently had students who were originally thought to have been like collaborating with other students in the class on an assignment, but they actually both just used a paraphrasing tool, you know, an AI paraphrasing tool from the internet to complete the assignment. And, you know, in further inspection, they did claim that they weren't very good at paraphrasing, so they were using that tool to learn how to paraphrase. And then it sort of, it came out in the assignment, right? It was very similar to what another student had submitted. So it is being used. At least we have, you know, record of students admitting to it openly.
Yeah, so it's, I mean, it's out there. Yeah, go ahead, David.
Yeah, I think like Heidi, it scares me too, because I think students are buying papers, and I think the companies that are selling them are using this type of software. Like, why wouldn't they? Because it's quicker and they can make more money this way. And like Heidi, I suspect it as well. And it's hard to articulate exactly why the writing doesn't fit. But it's like the transition words are it's too smooth, it's too clean, it's too clear. It doesn't seem like the student wrote it at the level that they're at. But Joel, it's nice to hear that there's cases coming through, because I have to admit, I don't submit those cases because I think I don't know what to put on the form. I can't say this is cheating, but I suspect it is. And it scares me that the next 20 years of my job is just going to be marking robots writing papers, because that's not rewarding.
Ron talked about that, you know, from the other end of the spectrum, is like, when do the robots take our jobs? And he didn't feel like that was a big concern, because it came up in his presentation where, you know, it's like, if the students are learning with these AIs and these adaptive case studies, and in his case in a faculty of business, like trying to deal with these complex sort of business challenges, you know, do we lose our jobs? But again, I know I mentioned I'm in education, and I teach online, I teach asynchronous. I think that, you know, education is still rooted in sort of this interactivity and community and trust and relationships, and AI. I think I'm probably getting ahead of myself on the slides here, but, you know, AI is in some ways like a tool, and tools come and go. You know, they said the overhead projector would replace the teacher, and they said TV would, and radio would, and they said the MOOC was going to close all our universities and stuff. And these things sort of never happen. We have these like evangelists in ed tech that say this tool is the next best thing, but when the tool can think, it becomes a little more terrifying, I guess, on that regard. So anyone else have something they want to share about student examples, or something they've come across? All right, we'll carry on then. If I click on the, sorry, my slides are over there. That's why I'm looking that way. I promise I'm not insane, at least not insane for looking to the left all the time. So
sure.
this,
hello, I can add a little bit, you know, about using different software and apps by students. I started a new course, finance, and I faced the problem when my students cannot use Excel properly. So I wanted to joke that in my case, for example, sometimes I would like them to use different services. It's better than to don't know how to use Excel, for example. So
100%. And I think that speaks to the sort of clarity and expectations in all of our courses, right? I mean, if you're asking someone to write their own original thoughts, they certainly shouldn't be using an AI to write their paper. But maybe if they're summarizing the findings of an experiment and they want to use a tool to paraphrase something, and you're not out there to assess their ability to communicate in written English, and you're trying to assess their ability to do some other type of computation, then there's, you know, maybe some wiggle room or something there. But again, in my mind, it comes back to the expectations that are laid out by us as instructors in the course, and what's acceptable and what's not, and you know, bringing Joel's office in when you have to. So uncredited here on the slide, plagiarized, and I think I forgot to add you to the references. This is right off of the Joel's website here about, you know, what we think about as far as academic integrity. So hopefully I'm not going to get cited for plagiarism on my slides here. But yeah, so plagiarism or possession or use of unauthorized materials, facilitation of a breach of integrity, forgery, falsification. So the way that computers and technology can facilitate a lot of the things on these slides is scary, as we've said several times. Sort of, you know, it's almost impossible to know in many cases. And I think that, you know, perhaps in an effort to mitigate some of this, again, and come back to the sort of communication with your students and the expectations, and perhaps things like flexibility around due dates, or, you know, due date ranges, or things like that we've talked about in academic integrity, can help if students, you know, they tend to bend the rules or cheat when they're feeling an immense amount of pressure. So any of the things we can do to talk about some of these tools, or, you know, obviously everyone has to finish their coursework and be assessed, but anything we can do to alleviate some of these stresses may help to, you know, dissuade them from heading down this road where they might partake in one of these activities, which can get them into trouble. Yeah, Heidi, go ahead.
I'm just kind of wondering, I think David mentioned it before, well, he wouldn't even know what to put on the form if he thinks someone used those AI tools. So if someone was to take, 2 or 3 sources, run it through this AI thing, and then put that text into the assignment, and assume you were able to detect that this was happening, what category would it fall under? Is it plagiarism, not using their own words because someone else wrote it, or like, I'm just wondering where it would fall.
I'm gonna defer that one to Joel, what he wants to see on the form there.
Yeah, I was going to say, within the academic integrity code, that list of examples of types of violations isn't exhaustive. There can be, breaches. And I think this is where potentially down the road, when we review that policy and update it, it might actually add that, more language related to AI usage, like unauthorized use of artificial intelligence, something rather, right? But I think for now, because it would be use of someone else's words or ideas, it would technically be plagiarism.
Okay, thank you.
Fair enough. Okay, so there you go. If you get one fired off to Joel as plagiarism. All right, so we got an idea of what AI is and what academic integrity is, and we've kind of been sort of weaving those two things together as we go. So I started to allude to this, I think, a moment ago, but I think the difference here, often in education, we look at technology as a tool. So whether you have a physical Dropbox in the hallway of your building or you have a Dropbox in D2L, you're still collecting an assignment. So technology, can facilitate a lot of things in learning and do interesting things. There's a model out there called the SAMR model, SAMR, related to technology implementations in education. And it's substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. If you just fire it into YouTube, you can hear a bigger breakdown on it. But it's a good sort of framework to decide where and how technology is being used in education. And I use it here in a couple of courses I teach to get my students to think about it when they start integrating technology into teaching and learning. But I'm not confident that AI fits in it, because I think it's always at the top. It's always sort of going to be that redefinition because it's changing so much. So, the examples that are commonly used, substitution might be, using a digital whiteboard instead of a regular whiteboard, like a smartboard to write on the board. Modification, you've got an actual change, so something that wasn't quite possible without the technology. Redefinition would be something like collaborating on a document with students on, in another school or another province or country, where you're both working on the same word processing document, whereas before we would have had to maybe email a copy of it and they would edit it and you would send it back. As a PhD student, I identify with this and love the fact that my supervisor and I can both work on the same document at the same time collaboratively, right? So we're up in the redefinition or modification of learning with technology there. And I think that AI is always going to end up in that top part. So it's a new kind of tool because it's sort of, it's adaptive. It's potentially bordering on, I don't want to say conscious thought, but like rational decision making. Whereas before, tools were just sort of facilitating knowledge transfer or assessment or making our lives easier as instructors. The sort of potential for a tool to replace you as an instructor is a totally different ball of wax, and I think the AI falls there, and it's something to think about. Just looking at my slide to make sure I didn't miss anything as I rambled on there. So popular version, the Lakehead, do we have any chatbots yet, Joel? I'm not sure. Chatbots are pretty popular deployment. I know they don't have a lot of academic integrity implications aside from, students are famous, and I asked Dr. Babin this at his presentation, like, do students try to break it? Because they use a piece of software called Demetrios, and I can send you the link, to do these case studies, and the students have to pay. It's like a textbook in that course. So they pay, I believe, $12 per case study in his course, and they have to do 3 case studies. So it allows them to log in and work through this like choose your own adventure problem solving for his course, which is like, a budget shortfall, say, for example, in the finance stream of a business degree. And it's like, how do you want to manage this? And it's interactive, and the instructor gets all of it, and they assess how they dealt with this particular situation that's related to their professional degree they're pursuing. They do let their students opt out at Toronto Metropolitan, and they can do a paper one, but they feel like the learning is better with the AI one, which is facilitated through the company called Demetrios. And think I have the link here if you bear with me. If anyone wants to go check out Ametrios, what they do, I'll throw that in the chat. So there's sort of interesting thing happening there with the AI and if the learning is better. And I don't know if it is, and I don't think we have enough data to know yet. Anyways, I was mentioning chatbots because that seems to be the first place that higher education plays with them. And those are the little things you see on the corner of the website that's like, how can I help you? And I think those are great and they can do wonderful things as long as it's clear. You know, I think it needs to be disclosed to the students that if they're using that they are in fact interacting with a robot. Maybe there's a student code of conduct issue there. And I had, like I said, where I said, do students try to break it? I asked Dr. Ron Babb and he said, well, they don't because they get assessed on it and they have to pay the $12 for it. So they don't like, you know, say something obscene to the boss right away in the case study because then the case study goes downhill and it looks like they're not able to actually do the task. So I think students are famous for that, for poking things till they break or taking them apart. Maybe we all are as a you know, a species. I shouldn't say maybe just students, but just something to consider there as you deploy or consider the deployment of any of these tools. So I also I threw this down here at the bottom, and if anyone wanted to talk about it, I wonder as AIs sort of start to facilitate instruction in courses, how students feel from an academic integrity point of view about deceiving a computer program as opposed to deceiving an instructor they have to face. So if you have an AI managed assignment in your course or you start playing with these tools, I wonder, you know, from a morals point of view, does a student feel less guilt or less challenged by cheating a computer program as opposed to a professor they have to face? So just something to consider there if you're thinking about these tools. Or I know Heidi mentioned that she had some adaptive tutoring and stuff. So now I am in the tutoring side of thing, I think is a little different than the assessment and the proctoring, of course. I wanted to throw this list up here just to let you know that there's a zillion of them. So these are all writing tools. So if anyone's doing any writing assessment, and I'm just looking at the time, it's 12:40. So I don't know if we'll go look at any of them, but I'm happy to share the slides link to everyone. And I can do that because I'm a fantastic multitasker with all my screens. If you want to go back and look at the list, there's the slides. Anyone at Lakehead should be able to view them, but these are a bunch of the tools that are out there for paraphrasing and writing essays. And I don't know how to tell folks how to look for it other than the things we've mentioned. And as far as, you know, the transition words, or if the vocabulary doesn't match what they've written before, I'm not sure how to defend against this kind of thing. But again, most of these tools are out here claiming to help people be better writers and helping to improve their writing. But I think that any of the providers of these tools are lying to themselves if they don't think that students are using these to gain some type of advantage in education or cheat or be in violation of student code of conduct. So yeah, so, you know, good and bad sides to both of them. Again, this is one of the most common places where AI is creeping into higher education, these sort of writing tools. So I have the full reference for this article later, but Zwicky Richter did a systemic review of literature in AI, I believe, over about 10 years. And they sort of came across these 4 themes. And I have the full reference for this article if you're interested. But these are the places where they felt like, based on their literature review and what's being published out there, where AI is creeping into higher education. So profiling and prediction. And if you read more about that in the article, that's sort of like trying to help students, academic advising and that kind of thing. Assessment and evaluation, right? Grading is the bane of our existence many times. Anything that we can do to make that sort of grading process easier. So instructors are leaning towards that tools for assessment and evaluation to make that part of their job easier. And now I think the tools that are excelling in that area are the personalized ones, adaptive systems and personalizations. We talked about adaptive tutors a little bit, and then of course, intelligent tutoring systems. So the thing about intelligent tutoring systems in AI is that they're going to make things harder, right? You don't have to work through the whole workbook. If you have your traditional paper workbook of your grade 2 math curriculum, and the student can answer every question in the first 3 pages in 30 seconds, well, then an adaptive tutor is smart enough to skip to page 20 or 30 or 15 or 12 or whatever, or just, you know, give less questions on that topic because it's clear the student's already mastered it. So that sort of timely adjustment to the process or progress of a student is very interesting application of AI. So I pulled this out of the abstract. I want to read it. The conclusions reflect on the almost lack of critical reflection of challenges and risks of AI ED, which is artificial intelligence education, the weak connection to theoretical pedagogical perspectives, and the need for further exploration of ethical and educational approaches in the applications of AI ED. And I absolutely love that, because I have spent the first 3 years of my PhD studies trying to tie anything related to anything I'm interested in to any theory. There's another lit review I can dig the reference up, a systemic review if people are interested in, and something like 80% of the articles published in peer-reviewed journals related to ed tech or teaching with technology make zero reference to the terms theoretical framework or theory. So ed tech research is not often grounded in theory, and that's something that's driven me bonkers as I try to pursue a PhD in ed tech research. And it looks like, according to this review, which was quite comprehensive, that AI research is headed down the same path. So, folks do case studies with different tools for teaching and learning, but it's not often tied back to that sort of theoretical underpinning where we hope to see all research that's published in peer review journals be, right? Like, I mean, we all do our research in our own areas, we all look at different things, but ultimately we sort of have to agree when we start on research that this is our bounded box, these are the rules we want to play in. And it seems like research related to technology and learning doesn't have a very well-defined box yet. And I would argue that it's been around for 100 years, so it should by now. And maybe one day I'll solve that problem if I ever graduate. So yeah, we've touched on this throughout the presentation, and AI writing aids. I think about like proofreading, and which is what some of these are designed for, is probably different than a writer, but how much a student leans on that and how much you tolerate and what your expectations are is something to consider. And I guess, we mentioned a little bit about some of the challenges and the biases, but again, there's some equity and diversity challenges related to some of these AI tools, like the Zoom live transcript, for example, sometimes has a hard time with names from other cultures where maybe English isn't the first language, and things like this. So I guess anyone who's recorded their, I asked who was using AIs, anyone who's recorded their Zoom lectures and turned on the live transcript is using an AI too. I believe that's powered on the back end by otter.ai. So that's a sort of adaptive AI that's producing the live recorded transcript from our Zoom recordings too. So, yeah. So I know I've taken questions throughout, but I think we're at 12:46, and that's kind of what we were aiming for. I didn't think we were going to get there, but we did. I'm excelling as an academic, love my own voice, so I can say that now. Yeah, so questions or thoughts? And I'm okay, Joel, with whatever you want to do. If you want to record the Q&A for a bit, or if folks have stuff they want off the record, we can kill the recording at the end and talk too. So
I think probably I'll turn off the recording now, and that way we can just sort of have like free conversation where people don't have to worry about asking questions. They're going to be on our website later on. So I'll turn that off now.